Today, we're going to be historical detectives. We're stepping back in time, almost 2,000 years, to piece together the story of a legendary era in South Indian history, the Sangam Age. It's a fascinating world of powerful kings, incredible poetry, and mysteries that are literally buried in stone.
But that brings up a huge question, right? When the people themselves are long gone and their cities have all but vanished, how in the world do you reconstruct their lives? How do you hear their voices across the centuries? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to solve together today. All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll get a handle on what the Sangam Age even is. Then, we'll explore the legendary kingdoms that we read about in their epic poems. After that, we're going to get our hands dirty and look at the physical evidence they left behind, see how it all comes together to paint a picture of their society, and finally, wrap up by looking at why this ancient world still matters to us today.
So, first things first, what exactly is the Sangam Age? To really understand this period, we have to start with where it gets its name. The word Sangam, it literally just means an assembly, or a gathering. And legend tells of these three great gatherings of poets and bards in the city of Madurai that happened over hundreds of years. The absolutely huge body of literature they created is what gives this entire period of history its name. Think about that. It's an era defined by its poetry. Now, to piece this all together, historians and archaeologists really lean on two very different but equally important sets of clues.
On one hand, you've got these vibrant, incredibly detailed stories from the Sangam literature. They're just full of kings and wars and love stories. And on the other hand, you have the quiet, powerful testimony of archaeology, of actual things you can touch. You could say the poems tell us what they thought, but the stones show us what they did.
So let's start with the literature. These epic poems, they're not just myths and legends. They're actually our main written sources, and they give us this incredible window into the politics and the power struggles of the time.
A theme you see over and over again in the poetry is the Movendar. Now, this Tama word literally means the three great kings, and it's referring to the three dominant dynasties that were pretty much always fighting for control.
And they each had their own symbol, their own brand, if you will. The Cheras, who were masters of the hilly west, they chose the bow. The Pandyas, who ruled the southern coasts, they used the fish. And the Cholas, ruling the powerful heartland, they claimed the tiger. And these weren't just logos. They were stamped on coins, flown on flags, a constant reminder of who is in charge.
And check this out. This table shows you just how smart these kingdoms were. See how each one had both an inland capital for political power and a coastal port for economic muscle? The Cheras had the west coast, the Cholas had the fertile river deltas, and the Pandyas had the south. By controlling these ports, they basically controlled the flow of goods and wealth from all over the known world.
But the literature wasn't just about kings and battles. A work like the Tirukkural, written by the poet Tirukkural, is this absolute masterpiece of ethics and wisdom. It covers everything from how to be righteous to how to manage your wealth, offering guidance on almost every aspect of life. It's just incredible proof of the profound intellectual culture of the age.
Okay, so the poems give us this grand story of kings and heroes. But if we want to understand the lives of ordinary people, we have to turn from poetry to stone. And here, the clues are carved by hand, and they offer a totally different kind of truth.
All across the Tamil country, you find these structures. They're called megaliths. The word just means big stone, and honestly, they are our most important physical link to the people of the Sangam Age.
So what are they? Well, basically, they're elaborate burial sites. You can think of them as stone tombs. Sometimes they were built like a box, which is called a cist. And the fact that we find more than one skeleton in many of them suggests they were kind of like family vaults, used by generation after generation.
But it's what's inside these tombs that really brings their world to life. Right alongside the human remains, we find their possessions, sturdy iron tools, this really distinctive black and red pottery, and elegant carnelian beads. These aren't just objects. They're a direct link to their skills, their daily rituals, and their deep-seated beliefs about the afterlife.
Okay, now this is where it gets really exciting. When we start combining the stories from the literature with the actual artifacts we dig out of the earth, a really detailed picture of Sangam society starts to come into focus.
This table shows us a really fascinating concept called tin eyes. The Sangam people saw their world as 5 distinct landscapes, and your tin eye, the zone you lived in, it determined your entire way of life. If you lived in the Karinji Hills, you were a hunter. If you were in the Maritim Wetlands, you were a farmer. It shows a society where culture was completely and totally shaped by the environment.
The whole foundation of their economy was agriculture. Rice was the big one, but they also grew things like cotton and sugarcane. And this farming surplus is what fueled a really vibrant system of trade, not just within the region, but with lands far, far away.
So what were they trading? Well, stuff the rest of the world couldn't get enough of. Spices like pepper, it was so valuable it was called black gold, along with pearls, ivory, and precious stones. The demand was so huge that Roman writers actually wrote about these giant ships sailing to ports like Musiri just to trade for these goods. This was a globalized economy, 2,000 years before that word even existed.
And what about the people themselves? While it wasn't an equal society, women held a pretty unique position. The sheer number of female poets is proof that many were educated, and powerful figures from their literature, like Kannagi from the epic Silappatikaram, were actually worshipped as goddesses, embodying these ideals of justice and power.
So, we've looked at the poems and we've looked at the stones, but this isn't just a story about ancient history. The Sangam Age continues to echo today in some really surprising and urgent ways.
And what's just incredible is that the story is still being written. I mean, recent discoveries at sites like Hiladi have unearthed evidence of a literate urban society dating all the way back to 800 BCE. Get this, that single discovery is pushing the known history of the Sangam Age back by centuries.
But here's the problem. The very progress that helps us uncover these sites also threatens them. Construction, quarrying for stone, and even illegal treasure hunting are erasing these irreplaceable links to our past before we can even begin to fully understand them.
And that brings us right back to our central question, but with a modern twist. We started by asking how we piece together an ancient world. I think the question we're left with now is, in our rapidly changing world, how do we protect that world and make sure its stories survive for the future?